Well, welcome to this evening edition of the Ocean Studio here as part of the Yahowah blog. I'm here with Wookie. We'll see how long he wants to participate in this program. I wanted to begin by just having an interesting chat. I finished a phone call with one of my dearest and longest term friends. His name is Joe. He was the man who wrote the original code for a company that we took public many years ago. He actually wrote far more sophisticated code than currently runs Amazon for our uh, our online.com retail operation. It really genius work that he was able to do for us. And now we're working on things like presenting all of my translations on the Yada Ya website, but doing so that you can see uh, every verse of, say, Barashith Genesis that I have translated one after the other. And every time that I've translated them, how in a different context and a different time, I may have rendered them. In fact, I would have rendered them differently because each time you go through, you're looking at the words and all of the conjugations and the stems and the pronouns and the like. And it's an art form as you're trying to render it. And the more you learn, the more you recognize patterns in God's testimony and can convey His intended meaning more accurately. And they're always amplified translations. And so we were having a conversation about this. And for those who may not know, who have not been to yadaya.com, where all of these books that I have written are presented free, is that 25 years ago, I invented an entirely new way of translating. Prior to this time, no one had done anything anywhere close to this, which is it's not only an amplified translation, and I realize there's one publication of a Bible that calls itself an amplified version, but it's not. It's just like every other version. The first ever amplified translation, where if there were 20 words that would properly render a single Hebrew word, I would present all 20 of them that made sense within that context, not overwhelming the reader by putting maybe the three or four most important of them in a bold font. And then within the parenthetical in a standard font, I would present many of the other possibilities so that you were not shortchanged, recognizing that God may have intended and probably did all of these things for us to know. So it's the first real amplified translation where the full meaning of every word is presented, not just the translator's decision as to what they think was the only word being conveyed. Uh, and I think that shortchanges you, and I think it's a terrible way to go about it. I'm not here to presume that if God used a word that can have 10 definitions that are all pertinent in that context, that we should shortchange anybody, including God, to only representing one of them. So it was the first ever genuine amplified translation. It was also the first where the generic form of the Hebrew word being translated was actually put right inside of the translation itself. So that after the bold copy, which is the amplified translation itself, inside of a parenthetical, the first word written in italics would be the most genitive form of the Hebrew word. And I'd write it, let's say that it was a Hebrew word that was a verb and it was had a prefix of a pronoun like he or she or, I, and or it was had a suffix of a pronoun like me or your, and then it perhaps had a stem that gave it additional meaning, like the hiffle or the any one of the seven stems in Hebrew that convey meanings, like the call, which would be considered a literal interpretation of those words. The peel, the niffle, or other examples. And then there's moods, also in the Hebrew, that convey volition in first, second, and third person. The cohortative, for example, is first person expression of volition. And then there are are four conjunctions that that convey um, time relative to the verb, whether it's ongoing or completed conjugation, I should say. And these are the four ways of conveying whether the action of the verb is taking place over a prolonged period or is for a finite period. And time can be expressed relative to the verb in four different conjugations. The most common are the perfect and imperfect, with the perfect being constrained in time, either in the past, present, or future, and the imperfect being unrestrained in time. Recognizing that no verb is stuck in time. In Hebrew, all verbs are true throughout time. So if I were to use the verb haya, meaning is, was, or will be, all of those are true unless the very context tells us that this is something that has not taken place, where I can then render it as will, or this is something we know has taken place in the past, where I can say was. Or so will be or was. And if it is something that is concurrent with the discussion, you can say is. But it's all from Haya, and every verb is unconstrained in time. It's kind of like light. On a photon of light, all time exists simultaneously. And so I'm the first to consider every one of these factors, but then render the actual verb in its most genitive form, because that's the only way you can look it up. If it's all loaded with the stems and the conjugations and the pronouns, and also with uh, conjecture, so it's got prepositions which are all attached to the verb, conjugations, then you'll never be able to look it up. So I presented the Hebrew term in the most generic form that you can copy and paste in any search engine, and it will verify the meanings that I have chosen. So you're in a position to prove that my translations are accurate. No one else has ever had the audacity to give you the tools to actually verify their translations, but I did. And it's a huge tool to build confidence between you and I. And so there's just nothing like these translations that have ever existed. And if a uh, passage was included in the Dead Sea Scrolls, I looked up every single one of them to see if there was a variance between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Masoretic text. And if there was, I made my translation based upon the Dead Sea Scrolls. So you would have the oldest extant version of the truth as it came from God. And in the Hebrew, for example, there's about a 14% difference between the Masoretic text and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So by doing that, we afford you the opportunity to know what the oldest witness says, and you have that correction. Then I did something no one else has ever done before, which I scrubbed every word of the Masoretic diacritical markings, where I came to realize that the Hebrew alphabet contains uh, 5 vowels and 17 consonants amongst the 22 letters. So the diacritical markings were really just a means that the Masoretes created in the 11th and 12th centuries CE. We're dealing with now 2,500 years after the Torah was written, to interpret it religiously the way they wanted it interpreted. And so they made different words mean different things based on when they marked them. And so I scrubbed at all of that, and I share with you every meaning that is based upon the word as it appears in the original text, without all of those markings. So you're going back to divine writ as it was inspired, in this case now 3,500 years ago with the Torah, 2,500 years ago with the last of the prophets, with Malachi. Again, no one's ever done that with you. So it became a very different way of us being able to communicate and to reveal information. And in doing that, I realized that there are two letters that can make the very similar vowel sounds. You can have the E sound or the A sound, the I, from the Aleph or the Ain in Hebrew. And the scholastic pedantic way to deal with it was a closed or open quote representing the Aleph to differentiate it from the Ain. Problem with that is that Word has a field day with open and closed quotes, single quotes, and we'll decide, do you want it as, it's a smart quote or just standard, and it will go vertical. In fact, almost all computer presentations now just show the open and quote as a vertical slash. They don't make a differentiation between the open quote or the closed quote. And so the old scholastic way of dealing with this, which very few people followed anyway, is rendered moot because of the nature of both the way Word processes these quotes, and also because all modern online presentations default to the strict, a quote is a vertical line, and it does not differentiate between open quotes and closed quotes. So we came up just 2 days ago with our own superscript, so that if it's an Ain, I have a superscript version of the little eyeball that was the original letter for the Ain, and a closed quote is if it was a LF, is the ram's head or bull's head that is used for the Aleph. We have a superscript of it. So now you're reading a word in the text, and you're going to know, well, does yada end in an Aleph or an Ain? And as it turns out, yada ends in a Ain, which is the eyeball, as does Zeroah, as does Shabuwa and Towrah. They all follow that same pattern. And so now you can actually see the pattern in the text as we're going to go back and redo all of the books for this new pattern. And I'm writing the current book, Coming Home 4, using it. So it's just really an interesting process. And so we're also trying to have an interactive glossary with our translation so that the words are underlined and you can click on them. But the challenge with that is there really is, on the transliteration, no way to differentiate currently between an Aleph and an Ain. And so you get the wrong word. Eth is both time and the preposition with in Hebrew. One is transliterated exactly the same way, ETH, but one is with an Aleph, the other was with an Ain. The one for time is with the Ain, the preposition is with an Aleph. There are, for example, Ab, which is father, the first word, the Hebrew lexicon. It's written obviously with an Aleph, first word, the Hebrew lexicon alphabetically. But there's also an Ab that speaks of darkness that is written with the Ain. And so when you try to do it from the transliteration, you're not going to be able to distinguish between the two until we most recently came up with this pattern. And unfortunately, for those trying to validate the translations that I am providing, by far the best lexicon is the Dictionary of Biblical Languages. It is so far superior to the others. But Strong's, because the copyright ran out, is available at every website. But Strong's has its limitations. It is keyed to the King James Version and does its best to support King James translations and forgets scholastic integrity and will change the meaning of the words to support King James. The Dictionary of Biblical Language is not. And so it's much better, but it's still in copyright. And so there's no access to it publicly unless you buy one of the scholastic tools, the kind that I use to do these translations and verify them. And so we're trying to find a way now to be able to convey that to our readers that go to the yadayah.com site. In fact, the yadayah.com site is really a clearinghouse for all things Yahowah. Nobody has ever come up with anything close to this. It has all 35 books that we have written. They're all available free. They come in 3 different versions. There's the PDF version for those that want to download it and transfer the whole thing to a phone or a tablet and be able to read it as a PDF. There's also a page turner version, which is really very clever and far more interesting. It's like you're actually holding the book on your phone or a tablet or the computer, and you can turn pages and you can search within the book. It gives you tremendous amounts of features that you can use when you're reading a book. We make all the books available in the page turner format, and then all the books are available also at Amazon.com. And you can buy them royalty free, and you can see some of them behind me here, the paperback versions of it. And so there's lots of ways to get to all of the books. They're presented by series on the site, and then there's a blog on the site where there are vlog entries, which is the thing that we're doing now, where we produce 5 days a week, 2 of these a day. Sometimes upwards in 4 and 5 hours of vlogging a day, and all of them are updated and presented on the Yahowah.com site, which is very difficult to do because the way that X and Facebook and particularly YouTube present these is they have huge access to enormous data farms and to conductivity, so that they can not only store the enormity of these blogs, because a video is enormous size, but they can also stream it to you. And they built their business on being able to serve up many streams to many people simultaneously, and then house this virtual unlimited library of video. And you could not afford that as an individual person, but we have found a way to take you so that you can click on one of these vlogs at Yahowah.com. You will stay on our website, and yet you will the very vlog is playing from YouTube, but yet you're still on our website. So you can go through any one that you want to while staying on the website. It's you don't have to go out into the social media world, if you will, which is a pretty rough and tumble place. You can get all of your information staying on the website, staying where the books are presented, but still be able to play these and listen to them. And then many of our shorts are automatically updated and they're presented on the site. We've written some marvelous songs, and my wife in particular is the songwriter, and they're presented on the website. Soon, some of the promotional material, which is just so beautiful, and the way that it identifies Yahowah with Yahweh and with Dode, God's beloved son, and conveys this message. And they're going to be added to the website. We have a blog because, well, if you look at X and at Facebook, most people communicate not with long form videos like you would see on YouTube, but with a picture and comments. A short narrative about that particular picture. That is a blog versus a vlog, and so we've actually have live updates to the blog where it automatically picks up the most frequent posts that we have made and presents them for your edification, so that you know what we're thinking and what we're sharing about not only Yahowah and getting to know God, but also in repudiating religion and politics, which is a huge part of our mission because it's a huge part of what God wants done. And then recently, we added all of the translations, which now you can see this done in the format that I'm sharing with you. You can see exactly how the text reads, and if you just want to read the translation, it's all there, and you can read all the way through an entire book. It's all available to you. But also, if you want to read the analysis of that passage and what can be learned from it, the insights that can be deduced from it, and how it relates to other things, or even an explanation of how we came to render these words this way and identify what they represent, you click on the hyperlink above each verse that is translated, and it will take you in the page turner books right to that spot. and then you can read all of the commentary, the introduction of it, and the conclusion of it, and the analysis of it, right at your fingertips. And that glossary that is built in, which now we're working with, because for the glossary to really work, we have to be the first to solve this presentation of on the transliterations. Is it an Aleph or an Ain? And then be able to link to the proper word. And it's no one has ever attempted to do this way, and it's a good challenge. So we're trying to create that ability as well, with, I think, a more reasonable and accurate definitions than are just available in Strong. So that's part of the process too. We just had a long conversation about that, and some of the challenges, because heretofore no one has done what I have done. But no one's ever created an amplified translation. No one's ever created a translation where the Hebrew words being rendered are actually put in the text so that you can verify them and look them up for yourself. No one has ever done them based upon correcting to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and no one has ever written a commentary on them while they're presenting the words and analyzing why those choices were made and what can be deduced from them. This has never happened before, and the only existing translations of any magnitude are written by large institutions and publishing companies for a profit, as opposed to an individual who has dedicated his last 25 years of his life to offering you this kind of material, and all of it's free. I ask nothing from you. And so it's a remarkable situation that exists here, and it's all for you to learn who Yahweh is, why we know that his name is pronounced Yahweh, and what he is offering through his Bereth covenant, and how that is facilitated through the Moedim, these restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony, who fulfilled them, when they fulfilled them. There is a timeline that goes through all of the important events all the way through this process from creation 14 billion years ago, through the events at the Garden of Eden, concluding 6,000 years ago, all the way up to what's going to happen over the next 7 years, which is going to be extraordinarily cathartic. In fact, the most recent book that's been published, Time of Trouble, is 825 pages detailing what's going to occur over the next 7 years so that you're prepared for it. No secrets. It's going to tell you exactly who everyone is, what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, what the consequence is going to be, and you'll particularly know what's in store for Israel. So just enormous wealth of information, all at your fingertips, all at yadayah.com. We even have a new and updated version of the ancient Hebrew font that we looked at every old, from by old, it would be at least 3,000-year-old documentation of the original pictographic font. And that font shows up in places in Egypt. It shows up in places in what was Phoenicia, now Lebanon. It shows up in the areas surrounding Israel, like with the Moabites. It shows up, of course, in digs and findings in Israel. The most recent that had some 15 of the 22 letters was the lead tablet that was found on Mount Ebal. And so we looked at how the letters were originally drawn so that we could update them and come up with a font that was much easier to use, that was much more graphically represented of the thing being conveyed. You know, the hand for the yod, the fact that the aleph is both a bull and a ram, and to show how both are represented in it, how the Beath is the depiction of a home, Daleth is a doorway. So each of these letters, the Ain is happens to be an eye, for example. The Tazday is somebody in a reclined position holding a something to read. So every one of the letters is communicated that way, and it really is a pretty tremendous tool. So we have that new font, also free. We don't charge for anything. We don't ask anybody's identity. It's just all there for you to enjoy, to read, to learn from. And you don't have a whole lot of time if you want to make this Shabuwa harvest. If you want to roll the dice and think maybe you'll be one of the lucky ones who survives unto the Towrah gleaning, which will be 7 years from now, during a time that most people on this planet are going to die. 2 out of 3 Jews, and they're going to fare better, I think, than the world at large. Then there will be a Towrah harvest. You'll have 7 years then to read up to that point if you're among the survivors. But chaos is going to reign on this planet. And then, of course, then there is the Towrah mortal remnant that benefits from the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. And so you'll have another opportunity there if you're not overtly religious or political. So tremendous resource. One of the things you'll find there is there are over 10,000 unique insights that were previously unheralded, things that no one had ever thought of before, recognized, but yet was always in the text. Insight like it's Yahowah who caused the fall of man, and explaining why he caused the fall of man is riveting. It's pertinent to your life today. There was no Eve in the garden. Her name was Towrah. It means to speak one's mind. It doesn't mean source of life. It means to speak one mind. And Yahowah caused the fall of man before Towrah was even conceived. And Yahowah is very explicit as to what he expected from man. Man did not perform to those expectations. And so he booted us from the garden for our benefit, so that we would have a chance of demonstrating that we could do those things. And that is what we're trying to convey. So that's a profoundly important insight shared no place else in the world. The fact that there are 3 outcomes for a human soul, not just 2. The religious would tell you that you're either going to heaven or hell, and that is simply not true. The very few people, in fact, it's about 1 in a million, maybe even less than that. God's analysis says thousands, and thousands amongst billions would be 1 in a million. That's how few end up in Shamayim, in heaven. So that's exceedingly rare, and for that, there are things that you need to know. And for example, there's 5 conditions of the covenant, and the covenant is the only way to enter Shamayim, something that no one had previously been able to deduce. But I share with you those 5 conditions of the covenant. And then there's 5 benefits of the covenant. They're all delivered by the fulfillment of the first 3, moed mikre, something as a word that may not mean anything to you unless you have read these books and know God's terminology. But the moed are restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. Mikra, in the plural mikre, are invitations to be called out and meet with God. And there are 7 of them. The first 3 enable the benefits of the covenant. And the second of those 3 is actually the most important, and it's not even recognized in Judaism or in Christianity. It's the mikra of matzah. People think that Passover is a 7-day celebration. It's not. It's the first day of Chag Matzah. Matzah is the key day. It's when our guilt was removed and carried into Sheol by Dode. That's another insight that no one had been able to do previously. The most important discovery, I think, in human history pursuant to life, why we exist, and how we can continue to live forever, is the fact that it's David, who is the chosen one, the Messiah, the Son of God, who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, becoming our Savior in 33 CE, year 4,000 Yah. And then to prove that and to show all of the prophecies and all of the statements that declare it is, again, something that doesn't exist anyplace else and has never previously been shown. Wookie is very excited about that material. You can see he's out looking for the next insight. So Wookie is quite happy about all of this. But there are literally 10,000 of these, and the 25,000 pages of Yada Yahowah. And again, they're all free to you. But at this point, if you were to dedicate 3 hours a night, every night, it would take you a full year to read through this. And even that probably wouldn't be enough. I would recommend reading through it 2 and 3 times. So it's a lot to learn. And there's no place ever that this kind of information has been available. I've written more that about insights that can be derived from God than all of the other prophets combined, and validate everything so that you're never reliant on me saying that this is because I say so. Everything that I have deduced, I prove based upon an accurate rendering of what God has previously revealed as true. So it's an extraordinary opportunity for you. I hope you avail yourself of it. As we begin this program, we're turning to volume 2 of our series called Coming Home. The Coming Home series is primarily devoted to calling Yehudim. Jews have called themselves by an errant name. There is no reference to a Jew anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. They are Yahud, and the plural, Yahudem. It is a compound of Yahweh's name, Yahweh, and Dod's name, who is God's beloved, the Son of God, the Messiah, our Savior. And so to be the beloved of God, you are a Yahud. And it calls Yahud and Yisrael. Yisrael means to engage and endure with God. Individuals who engage and endure with God. It's Ish Sarah El. It is calling God's people home. And now you can become Yisrael by embracing what it means to be Yisrael, to engage and endure with God. And so that the whole series, and there's 3 books currently as part of that series. I've written most of the 4th and hope within the next month that I can get it published. I'm very systematic though in the research that I'm doing. For example, I'm representing the 89th Mizmowr, which is the most important book in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms by a considerable margin. And I'm presenting it now that I know who Ethan Ha-Ezraki is and what the occasion was for the deliverance of this song. And so when it delves into something like rocks that are rolling in the raging sea, and they're being used to batter and bruise Rahab as a deadly and belligerent fool that is egotistical and violent. That this individual is brought down ultimately by Yahweh's fortified Zeroah. And so I'm now taking the time to say, based on this context, the Zeroah, who can be only 1 of 3 people, is this individual. Rahab is this individual based upon this context, and I'll go through the other prophetic references to it so that you know what the evidence is to define Rahab as this individual at this time being brought down by Yahweh's Zeroah, who is this person, and designated as such. It really is a marvelous addition, very systematic, diligent, and a powerful way for you to come to have prophecy come alive in your life. So this is what we are doing currently, and we'll have that book published for you very soon. All that said, I'm going to begin on Coming Home 3. Again, it is a series that is devoted to calling Yisrael and Yehud home. It features Dod's Mizmowr. A Mizmowr is a psalm. It is a song with lyrics set to a melody. Most of what Dod wrote, and well over 100 of these, are songs to be sung, and they are Yahweh's favorite songs to be sung. They're all inspired by Yahweh, and they are powerful in their implications. And these volumes feature Dod's songs and then other prophetic texts that are pursuant to our understanding of his songs. So this volume begins that Yahweh's animosity toward the Gentiles who have fraudulently claimed to have inherited the blessings that he gave to Yisrael, which of course would be both Christianity and Islam. They're based on replacement foolology, where they claim that their church inherited, or that Muslims inherited, all of the promises that God gave to the Jews. Their rationale in this is that God got mad at the Jews for one reason or another. In the case of Christianity, it's because they killed their God, which, of course, is problematic because A, God's not a man, B, men cannot kill God, and C, it was the Romans that killed the mythical Jesus, not Jews. Jews don't crucify. They had no authority to do so. It was the Romans who did so. So there's no credibility to anything the Christians say. And of course, the Quran is a ridiculous book in the history of it turns on Jews and condemns them because, well, Muhammad ran out of material when he moved to Yathrib, which was a Jewish farming community. And he bought Talmud readings from the rabbis. The Babylonian Talmud had just been completed around 500 CE. This was in the 7th century. Muhammad buying these from the rabbis. He then attributed them to Allah, twisted them to suit his situation, but then didn't pay his bills. And the rabbis started to mock him when he claimed that Allah had revealed what they had read to him from their Talmud. And so, as a psychopath, Muhammad responded by deciding that he would kill the Jews, and he perpetrated genocide against them in Arabia. And so that's the reason that the Quran hates Jews. The rabbis made a horrendous decision and providing this material to Muhammad that made the Quran appear like a religious text, where otherwise he would have been someone that the world would have paid no attention to, just the run-of-the-mill thug that was using terror and armed robbery to enrich his followers. He would have been far less well known than Genghis Khan, who had a similar tactic, but Genghis Khan was 1,000 times more successful than Muhammad. It's just that Muhammad had Talmud readings that he twisted to make his Quran appear religious, and therefore he's fooled more people religiously than the territory that Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan were able to conquer. But that's the reason why those texts hate Jews. So as we continue with this, God is exceedingly frustrated with all of those religions like Islam and Christianity that pretend that God got mad at the Jews and gave the promises that he made to them to either their church or to Muslims, when there is absolutely no evidence for it at all in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, zero. And all evidence is to the contrary, because every prophecy has God restoring his relationship with Israel, returning to Israel. The final remnant are all Israelis and Yehudim. And even when he has his homecoming, it is to Israel. He's coming back to the Temple Mount, and it is Goyim who are obliterated for being religious and political. There will be a mortal remnant of Goyim that will survive, but they will be few and far between, most because they were belligerent towards Israel, stole Israel's promises. They're going to be obliterated when God removes all traces of religion and politics from the earth, so he can restore the whole planet to the conditions that were found originally in Eden. And that will occur on Towrah for the benefit of Sukkah in year 6000 Yah 2033. So God is exceedingly frustrated with what Christians and Muslims have done in this regard. And he's disappointed that Jews haven't stood up for him. They haven't said that those texts are fraudulent for this reason. And, when God even says, I'm going to restore and renew the covenant in Yirmiyah 31, it specifically says with Yisrael and with Yahudah, not with Goyim. And he even says that I'm going to restore it. And what I'm going to do this time that is different is, rather than handing you a copy of the Torah, which you can reject or accept, I'm actually going to integrate my Torah inside of you so it becomes part of the fabric of your life. Pretty hard to justify a Talmud or a New Testament or Quran when God is returning by installing his Torah inside of all of those who survive. Um, so God has a bone to pick with rabbis, with Christians, and with Muslims that's going to end very poorly for the religious. And the fact is that he gave Yisrael to his people, and he is going to speak of those blessings and of their inheritance in this next Mizmowr. Um, and God is making a point, one that is relevant to us today, so we should listen to him. Additionally, he has a great deal more to say about the villainous creature identified in the lyrics of the preceding song that we reviewed just earlier today. And I wish we had gotten a little earlier start. It's already gone dark, so you had just a glimpse of the long rays of the sun and the setting sun here on the Virgin Islands. The rest of the program, unfortunately, is going to be in the darkness. You can probably still see the palms waving in the, well, it's a pretty light breeze now, not even moving much behind me. But as I said, we had a long conversation with my good friend and programmer and webmaster who's trying to develop all of these things as tools for everyone to use going forward. So it was important to get that done. So this next psalm begins with Dode asking Yahowah why he has distanced himself from his people and for how long he intends to remain aloof. If you are not aware of this, God proclaimed many times that he was no longer in direct contact with Israel. When Israel says, you know, we don't need other kinds of missile defense systems, we have God on our side. No, you don't. You did, but you walked away from him. You, when God spoke directly to you, you want to look this up because it's listed two places in the Towrah. You told God to shut up and go away. You never wanted to see him or hear from him again. And he obliged. He says, okay, that'll work out fine. You were being belligerent. He didn't want anything part of you anyway. But, you know, he said, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick men and I'm going to communicate through those men. And he has done so ever since. In the book of Hosea, he actually tells you that you have been so religious, and he hates religion. So God hates Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. That's quite an insight for those of you who are keeping track of novel, unheralded insights. But God hates religion. He disliked politics, and he hates religion. And he said, because you are religious, I'm divorcing you. And he offered a divorce decree through the prophet Hosea and was very clear. He says, I am not returning to you until you return to me. And at this point, it's not even 1/100th of 1% of the Yehudim and Israelites of the world that have Shub returned to Yahowah. And so until there is a meaningful return of Israelites and Yehud, even of Jews admitting that they aren't Jews, that they are Yehud, that it means beloved of Yah, until they do so, God's going to remain aloof. And that's why the question is being asked. Dode's a prophet. He is seen into the future. The answer to the first question is quite simple, and thus Dode wrote it for our benefit. God is setting an example that we must follow if we want to enter his home. He has separated himself from his people because they have become political and especially religious. They have emulated the ways of the Goyim. There is nothing wrong with different ethnicities. God does not make any decision based strictly on genetics or skin pigmentation. The problem of the Goyim that is repeated throughout the Torah and prophets is that the Goyim had a propensity to be overtly religious and political, and to integrate religion and politics. And God says, I don't want you doing that. And what happened? Well, the Israelites became the most Goyim of all people, in the sense that there is no ethnicity on the planet that is more political or religious. In fact, it's so bad that if you speak of being Jewish, the first thing most people will think is you practice Judaism. Judaism is a religion. Being Jewish is an ethnicity. And yet they're so blended together because of their propensity of Jews to be religious. And if you think of political action and of politics being heralded by one group in particular, the group most known for their a high percentage of political activity are Jews. And so the Jews did exactly what God said don't do. They became more goyim than the goyim. And that's what God says, I don't want you to do. But they haven't listened. They haven't listened in a very, very long time. So when I criticize them, I'm criticizing them using the same process that God does. I'm just telling you what God had to say. And, if you don't like it, take it up with him. He, laid it right on the line. He says, if you listen to me and take advantage of what I'm offering, life's going to be great for you. If you choose to ignore it and you choose to be religious and political and rebel against me, well, that is not going to work out very well for you. That you really ought not do that sort of thing. And well, that's what they did. So it would be hypocritical now for Yahowah to ask us to disassociate from these institutions and then endear himself to those embracing them. But clearly he does not. So when his people cease being political and religious and answer his call to return home, he will come back for them. That day is on Yom Kippurym. The preceding time, 10 days before it, gets a remnant of Yisrael ready for that. Towrah in year 6000 2033. That's another issue that Jews have. They believe the Rambam's accounting, and he was an absolute nincompoop in this regard. He had creation almost 4,000 years ago when creation was 14 billion years ago. He didn't know that the timeline begins with the expulsion from Eden. And he got that time wrong because he had a fascination with the number 19 and the sanctification of the moon and got it all wrong. And he is wrong by 197 years. So anybody that is playing around with the Jewish calendar is wrong by 197 years. We are now just 7 years from the end, year 6000 So we're in year 5993, approaching year 6000 And that is why we need to be prepared for the Shabuwa harvest, which occurs 7 years before God's return. And he's returning on the day of reconciliations. Perfect name, right? Yom Kippurym, plural for to reconcile. It begins. For what reason is your presence so far away, distanced and separated, Yahowah? Concealed in times of drought and destitution, of being cut off and restrained. This is Mizmowr, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 10:1. We ended our program earlier today in the 9th Mizmowr. This is the next one, Psalm 10. Now, we don't know that these were written in this order or what time during Dode's life that he actually wrote these. I think most were actually written now towards the very end of his life after he returned to God. And that might be hinted at here because there was a period for at least 14 years. From the time that Dode was 56 to the time he was probably 65, Yahowah and Dode were not speaking. God would not be seen talking directly to Dode or in his presence. And the reason for that timeout is that Dode made some really, really bad decisions about various things. I'm trying to get my dog to stop biting her nails. He made some really bad decisions about things, and that God got miffed at him and said, while this condition exists, our line of communication is going to be curtailed. And so he could be asking about this. It became particularly bad during the Bathsheba episode, but God was talking to Dode through Nathan the prophet even before that, as we find in 2 Samuel 6 and 7. And the Bathsheba episode is chronicled in 2 Samuel 11 and 12. So there is a period of time where God did remove his presence. He didn't remove his spirit, but he certainly wasn't talking to Dode in first person. He could be asking about that. It's more likely that Dode as a prophet is looking forward in time, knowing that he is going to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, and know that while he does, that there won't be a single Yehud that takes advantage of what he has done for a very long time. And that it won't be until God inspires a goyim, to a goy to properly understand what he has said, draw your attention back to Dode, reestablish Yahweh's name, reestablish the importance of the Moed Mikra, explain when they were fulfilled, by whom, what the benefit is, how to observe them, that this would be rectified. And it's finally being rectified in your hearing now, and will be even more so as we return as one of the two witnesses on Passover in 2030. So for what reason is your presence so far away and distant and separated, Yahweh? Concealed in times of drought and destitution, of being cut off and restrained. It's a question that Jews should be asking, but they don't, because the rabbis have stepped in to speak for God and created this horrible religion that is really separating Jews from Yahweh. They won't even say Yahweh's name. They've erased it. They superimpose their Talmud on top of the Torah and prefer the Talmud to the Torah. And so it's a terrible situation that Jews have found themselves in. That's 10:1. So God intervenes. The fact is, he does in human affairs when it's required to honor his covenant promises and to liberate his and defend his people or fulfill the Mikra. But otherwise, he is only seen by those who observe the written witness of the Torah and prophets. Now, we have learned recently that God did have a way of keeping his people and his plan on track without having to intervene in a way that precluded free will by him making a show of himself. And that began with a man named Enoch. It's Chanok is the actual name. His name describes why he was chosen and what God does with him. But there are a number of souls that God found that he could relate to, that he could trust, he could rely upon, that he enjoyed working with, that had attributes and attitudes that he found appealing. And he has interjected those individuals throughout time when it was necessary to resolve a problem, like when Dode went AWOL. He really lost it. And God wasn't talking directly to him. He's not going to intervene in that kind of a circumstance, but he did provide a remedy because, well, the fulfillment of the Moed all fell on Dode doing it. The world would come to a crashing halt. There would be no salvation for anyone. Our planet would be destroyed by humans had Dode not changed and restored his relationship with Yahweh. And Yahweh did that by intervening with a man of his choosing who helped Dode discover who he was, what his calling was, and brought him back to his senses. So this is how Yahweh operates. And while Yahweh is highly communicative when working with the covenant's children, especially through his testimony, but also when there's something that he wants done, he will say it in no unequivocal terms. And when we're about his business, he is available. And to everyone else, he remains unseen, but he still proves his existence through prophecy and the accuracy of his testimony, scientifically, historically, consistently, and the way the whole story holds together. He is an exceedingly effective communicator that in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, he proves that he is God, that he exists, and that he inspired these words. And this is why during the Roman siege of Jerusalem, or centuries later during the Holocaust, neither the victims nor the perpetrators had any clue as to who he was, because they weren't looking at the right places. They didn't have the right attitude. You really have to have a mind set that you're open to God's testimony. You'll go where the words lead. You'll scrub your mind of religious malfeasance, recognizing that God hates religion, and will take him at his word. And there was no one to do that for a very long time. And quite frankly, there was no one for him to speak with, since he remains overtly opposed to the political, religious, military, and conspiratorial influences that are prevalent within human society. He had to find someone that had become familiar with each of these things and that had chosen to reject them, as was the case with Moshe, as was the case with Abraham. So for most, Yahweh is not readily known or easily known. The effort required to realize that God has proven his existence as well as demonstrated his inspiration of the words found in his Torah, his Nabi prophets, and his Psalms, like this Mizmowr, then that we can trust him, appreciate what he is offering, and what come to know what he expects in return. That effort is considerable. I mean, I have spent 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 and 7 days a week for 24 and a half years, and am still learning. Now I'm learning at a much faster pace than I was at the beginning because we have such a foundation of knowledge and understanding together. But to know our purpose and place in the universe takes a rational and open mind and a diligent, systematic approach to Yahweh's testimony. That's why I've made these 25,000 pages of translations and analysis available to you for free. It's why I'm doing these programs now, to introduce you to that material so that you can benefit from all that I have learned and shared since I've validate my claims, prove every conclusion that I make based upon Yahweh's testimony. You're in a position to know exactly where to look and what God is offering, what he expects in return from us. Now, considering the sorry state of religious translation, the moths you can see are attracted to these lights, and one of them saw a glimmer in my eye and flew right into it. So we'll try to go beyond that. Another one flew right into my mouth as I was breathing in. So price that I pay for getting so involved in trying to improve our glossary and our translations with my my dear friend and technologist. Well, anyway, considering the state of religious translations, we have to be willing to either learn Hebrew or embrace the tools that facilitate our understanding of God's language, or you can write on my shoulders. I have made 25,000 pages of translations and analysis available to you. And I've been doing this now, as I say, for 24 and a half years, and I'm still learning, sharing what we've discovered to make it, I do it to make it easier for you, but I don't want to make it too easy for you, because God doesn't want those who are looking for a quick and easy answer into heaven. If you're not willing to invest the time, and I'm talking pretty fast, I'm moving through a lot of material, I'm sharing many things with you. If you're not willing to validate these claims, to investigate this for yourself, to go to yadayah.com, open the first book, An Introduction to God, and then go through the Yahowah series, the Observation series, the Coming Home series, to learn what I have discovered about the false god of Islam and in Christianity, and the Twistianity and the Goddamn Religion series, even the issues with Judaism and the Babel series. You're just not going to be prepared to be part of the solution, to come home and be part of God's family, to be part of the covenant, to live forever, to be able to leave this planet with your soul enveloped in radiant energy and light, as opposed to your soul dissipating into nothingness. So what most simply do not appreciate is that coming to know Yahweh has to be challenging. It must be a filter to make eternity enjoyable and rewarding for everyone, including God. To avoid allowing heaven to be like earth and to be, what a mess we are making of the planet right now, there must be tests, there must be filters, there must be a way for God to know, are you observant? Are you closely examining and carefully considering his testimony? Because if you're not, then you're not welcome. Are you a respondent? Are you willing to engage based upon what he has said and act upon his instructions? Are you willing to be reliable such that he can trust you, so that if you make a mistake, you learn from it? If you fall, you get back up, wiser and better for the experience. This is what he is looking for, and he has given us everything we need to be able to do this. And I have done as much as I can to spoon feed it all to you in the Yahowah series, which is why it's there. So those without a passion for learning and exploring, those without an honest commitment to the truth and to reason, would feign their acceptance of a few simple steps and contaminate the covenant and eternity with their apathy or their unfounded opinions into perpetuity if it was too easy. So it's not, and we won't make it such. So the Torah is both the path and the door, one that can swing open or closed. And you need to have an appreciation that that since there are not going to be a lot of people that are going to make the Shabuwa harvest, who are going to be mature and standing grain, and there will be very few people that will be part of the Towrah gleaning. We don't know the number that God's going to bring in for the Towrah sacrifice of the anima parah that he's going to purge of modest religiosity and politics so that they can be prepared for entry into the garden on Sukkah and welcome Yahowah and Dod, the Messiah, back on Kippurym between the 24th of September 2033 and the 7th of October in that year. But what we do know for certain is that the opportunity that follows will be 1,000 years long. So it gives people 1,000 years to get it right, to show that they can be observant, that they can be thoughtful, that they can be responsive, and they can be responsible. And again, God's not looking for perfect. That's stupid. There'd be no interest, no purpose in that. What he's looking for is observant and thoughtful, responsive and responsible. 4 things we can do, but so few people do them. And again, that's the purpose of this program and of these books. So all those who come to God through his words will have been vetted along the way, and Yahowah wants to only harvest standing grain come Shabuwa. And it will be through this due diligence that we find that we can know God. And truly, the process of learning and growing is a reward in and of itself. It is the most fun we can have. I've been campaigning now with my team here that, boy, would I ever love to go back to a pace where we're only doing one of these shows a day, maybe 4 or 5 days a week at the most, and I'm able to continue to learn, to translate, to make the connections, and I love sharing what we're learning as we're learning it. It's just so much more exciting, so much fresher, so much more invigorating and pertinent when we do that. And I'd love more time to do that sort of thing every day. And so we'll see how it plays out and how much time we actually have. Now, the phrase here, ma amad ba rakok, why do you stand away, separated, continuing to present yourself as so distant and remote for such a long interval time, provides, I think, an interesting insight to the period in question. Apart from supporting his son while fulfilling Pesach Matzah Kodim in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, it would be 2,000 years later that he and the author of this song, Yahowah and Dod, would find their identity more conspicuously disclosed, which is why I was called to do what I'm doing for you. Reintroducing Dod to you, reintroducing Yahowah by name to you, explaining exactly what they did, when they're returning, and what they're offering. And when I considered the words Yah inspired in this next statement, it was, it took me back to a time when I was not part of the covenant, but I went through the museums throughout Europe, in both East and Western Europe, behind the Iron Curtain and what was considered the West. And as I did so, I saw things that opened my eyes, and as I pursued these exposure that travel brings, and I've been in 175 countries, many were dedicated to displaying the torture devices that were deployed by the Roman Catholic Church, and in particular to anguish Jews, and of course anyone else they didn't like. And so after reading what comes next, I realized that those who invented and deployed these heinous devices to torture God's people will be forced to suffer their effects. Now, you can call it divine retribution, I would call it justice. The more I learn about what they did under the name of their God-forsaken religion of Christianity or Islam, the more I want the political and religious Christians and Muslims who authorized and encouraged the use of these torturous devices to suffer well beyond what they did to their victims. I mean, think of the first 100 years of Islam, 200 million people killed, millions upon millions raped, tortured, enslaved. The people who perpetrated those crimes should face retribution. Those who were abused by them, the victims of the Holocaust, of the Inquisition, of the pogroms, and the victims of Islamic terrorism. They deserve closure. Their souls deserve closure. They were screaming when they were bound and then tortured that those who were torturing them deserved to get the same. And God's going to provide that for them. So this sounds like the father of lies that is launching his assault against Jews. And it reads, with arrogance, Garrote, with unwarranted status, the immoral and self-proclaimed prideful and presumptuously haughtiness, the dishonesty, the condemnable and the guilty, the rasha, those who are wrong, vexing and unethical, with inflamed passions and burning animosity, persecute and harass, they deluct, they hotly and they impulsively pursue and oppress, the outspoken and the unpretentious, without political or religious status, ani, those with a lower status in society. But it's also with ani, it is the responsive. Those who respond to God, they're the ones that got persecuted. So let him be seized. Let him that perpetrated this be forced to endure. Tafas, let him be caught in the act for having perpetrated these malicious schemes and then arrested and then suffer for what they have done. And the nifl imperfect, the evil devices, the mazima, within the wicked invention, these implements of their design, which were part of their heinous plans, that they have imagined and that they have conceived. Zu chahab, which they have invented and judged appropriate, even desired and esteemed. If you were unaware of this, by the way, is Mizmowr lyrics to sing Psalm 10:2, then Google the torture devices of the Roman Catholic Church or the torture devices of Islam during its first 100 years. They are gruesome. They are heinous. And so in this statement, what we're finding is God says there will be retribution. There will be consequence. There will be fairness. There'll be justice. So Hebrew stems and conjugations are a story in themselves, as is the case with tafas, written in the nifl imperfect. It reveals that those who imposed these schemes and deployed the resulting devices will endure their effects for a considerable period of time. Therefore, it is God's conclusion that it is appropriate for perpetrators to endure the pain they imposed on his people. God will not forgive them, nor should he. When they are held accountable, I don't think that the church officials will enjoy the nauseating effects of the Pope's pear, the excruciating pain of Jacob's seat, the debilitating agony of their iron spider, the torturous effects of the scold's bridle, the horrific suffering of their heretic's fork, the anguishing misery of their lead sprinkler, the torment inflicted by their knee splitter, their infamous rack, the monstrous iron maiden, the scavenger's daughter, or the Strappado, the Inquisition's Spanish donkey, the head crusher, and the saw torture, the overwhelming agony of being drawn and quartered, being slowly burned at the stake, being boiled alive, enduring the repugnant torment of death by rats, or having to endure their breaking wheel. Look them up if you want to see why Christians must endure what they have conceived and perpetrated. To forgive and forget would be a miscarriage of justice. So keep in mind that these torturous inventions were not used to encourage religious devotion, but instead to impose the authority of the church and to suppress rebellion. They were implemented to control through fear. And make no mistake, they were commonly used on Jews for no other reason than they were Jews. In the end, it all comes down to who you choose to trust. On one hand, you have the likes of Moshe, Shamuel, Dod, Yashaya, Yirmiah, all of whom spoke for Yahowah. And as prophets, each proved that their witness was valid. Their revelations were meticulously made and are extant for our inspection in the Dead Sea Scrolls, dating to 300 BCE. They are revealed in the same story and were found universally consistent. Foremost among them were Moshe, who liberated God's people and gave us the Torah, and Dod, who united and protected Yisrael, brought us the Mizmowr and the Mashal, and then served as the Passover lamb. Moshe was called the greatest of the prophets, while Dod was the firstborn son of God, the branch from which we would grow, the chosen one, the set apart one, the Messiah, the King of Kings, the embodiment of the covenant, God's strong arm, the protective shepherd, the sacrificial lamb. On the other hand, you have Shaul, who would adopt the Roman moniker Paulos. He was given the name Question Him. He would write about himself on behalf of the Romans and the Greeks against Yehudah and Yisrael. He never once mentions Yahweh's name. He only provides one prophecy to validate his opinions, and he managed to get that one wrong. It was about his rapture, saying it would occur during his lifetime. Likewise, he claimed to speak for Jesus Christ, and yet on the lone equation, he attempted to quote something attributed to his mythological misnomer. He got it wrong. He doesn't have a single accurate quote from the character known as Gospel Jesus. Everything he wrote was in opposition to the story provided by the prophets. Even his own accounts were riddled with contradictions. When he attempted to quote God for the purpose of validating his claims, he always misquoted him and never once attributed a quote to Yahweh's name. And lest we forget, God referred to Shaul specifically as the plague of death, the father of lies, and the son of evil. Now, filling out this opposing hand, you have Luke, who wrote Acts as if Paul's propagandist, Peter, who was the first to rob Dod to create the mythos of Jesus, Mark, who was a groupie used by both of them, and Matthew, the ultimate plagiarizer, none of whom were even remotely credible. It seems that rather it should be an easy choice, and yet in a referendum of man over God, by a ratio of 1,000,000 to 1, the pinnacle of Yah's creation has chosen the likes of Paul, Luke, Muhammad, Akiba, and Marx over Moshe, Shamuel, Dod, Yashaya, and Yirmiah. There is no excuse for any of this. And I'm going to leave it at this point tonight. I'm sorry that I got a late start for you. We'll be a little more timely tomorrow in our presentation, and we'll continue to share the 10th Mizmowr of Dod, the beloved son of God. Thank you for listening. Good night.